quality of Turks. The Turks were naturally brutal people. Others blamed Islam, writing that Turks killed Armenians because Turks were religious fanatics who hated Christians. Some said the Turks attacked Armenians out of jealousy because, they said, Turks were less competent and less intelligent than Armenians. The biggest lie of all, however, was that the missionaries never mentioned the Muslim dead. In a civil war, in any civil war, if you only count the dead on one side, it will appear to be a genocide. This, not counting the Muslim dead, you will notice, has continued right up till today. The missionaries falsified events by not telling what actually happened. I have time for one example, the city of Van. We know that Armenian rebels took the city of Van, killed all the Muslims in Van and the surrounding region, and held the city until the Russians could arrive. Yet none of this appears in two missionary books that were written on the rebellions in Van and Bitlis. Neither book mentioned any revolution or any rebellion. One of the books mentioned no Muslim dead at all, no Muslims had died. The other devoted four sentences out of 339 pages to the Muslim dead. And it said that Armenians did indeed kill some Muslims, but that the Muslims deserved to die. What was presented to the American public was a classic romantic tale. The victims were the Armenians, the villains were the Turks, and the heroes were the American missionaries. The missionary stories were brought to Americans through the most efficient campaign that has ever been seen in the United States. Never before, and perhaps not since, has there been so effective an effort to blacken the reputation of a whole people. The system, the Near East relief system, was very well organized. There was a central committee, and there were state committees, and there were local committees. The campaign was everywhere. It was inescapable. If you lived in America during World War I, this is what you would have seen. On Sunday morning, you would go to church. The minister would preach a sermon about the suffering of the Christian Armenians at the hands of the Muslim Turks. Your children, who were too young to attend the church service, would go to a church school, where they would take part in a drama, a theatrical show, especially written for children. Some students, little students, girls, would play the parts of the starving Armenians. Others, big, bad boys, would play the part of the Turks, terrorizing the Armenians. Later that day, the children would take part in an Armenian parade through the streets of the town. At home, after lunch, you would settle down to read the newspaper. It would contain articles on terrible things done by the Turks and advertisements for Near East relief to gain money. The doorbell would ring, and you would find two nice ladies at the door. The organizers were told to always pick pretty girls to go to people's doors. The pretty girls would hand you literature, and they would take a donation for Near East relief. The literature would tell you how bad the Turks were, of course. That night, for entertainment, because, of course, there were no televisions, no radios, for entertainment, you would go and listen to a speech. It seems what some of you have done today for entertainment. You would go and listen to a speech. The speech would be from a member of Near East relief. He would show you slides of the suffering of the Armenians and the good work of American missionaries, and letting his audience know that the Armenian suffering was the fault of the Turks. Or, if you had heard enough speeches, you might want to go to a movie. The local cinema might be showing Ravished Armenia, the title of the movie. Ravished Armenia, a movie about an Armenian girl attacked by Turks. The next day, as you mailed letters from your business, you could not miss the posters on suffering Armenia on the post office wall. The same posters that were in government buildings in the town, like the posters that were on the wall in your business. Your children would be taught about the Turks and the Armenians in school. The history book would say the Turks had destroyed civilization in the countries they ruled. After dinner, again reading the newspaper, you would see a cartoon picture of a Turk, an evil-looking man, usually with a mustache, an evil-looking man holding a sword that was dripping with blood, and at his feet would be the bodies of dead Armenians. Having read that, you would finally, feeling tired, go to sleep, and probably dream nightmares about Turks. It may seem impossible that all the things said of Turks were believed by Americans, but remember that no one knew the truth. There was constant reinforcement. Everyone saw, everywhere, reminders of the evil Turks. Every book and newspaper told the missionary stories. Americans who would not have believed ordinarily believed them because so many people telling them this, so many people could not have been wrong. Americans might have doubted that the Turks ate their victims. They might have doubted that, but they would have believed everything else. The other force behind the creation of the big lie about the Turks was the British Propaganda Office. In World War I, the Ottoman Empire and the British were enemies. The British put their formidable propaganda machine to work to vilify their enemies being the Germans and the Turks. The ultimate aim of British propaganda in the United States was to bring America into the war on the side of Britain. Telling lies about the Turks was an effective part of that strategy. The British plan was to convince the Americans that the Turks were evil, and because of that, the Germans, the allies of the Turks, must be evil as well. It was an effective strategy that helped bring America into the war on the side of Britain. It also set a negative image of Turks that long outlived the war. British propaganda also told lies about the Germans, of course, but after the war, scholars and journalists investigated the propaganda against the Germans and proved them to be lies. No one looked at the propaganda against the Turks. It was never investigated. It was simply believed. Today, what the British told to the Americans seems to us unbelievable, especially if one knows anything of Turkish history. But remember, Americans did not know anything of Turkish history.